Well, thanks for having me. Not that you guys did much choice, I suppose. Charles is the one I should probably thank him, but it is good to be here. And like Charles said, increasingly getting involved out here. I think I'm facilitating 3 subjects at the moment, chaplaincy based, on behalf of Scripture Union, working in partnership with Malyon. So it is really great. So it's nice to be invited here from a different perspective. I've worked with Scripture Union, I think this is my 20th year. So I did 6 years of work as a chaplain, and then for the last 14 years I've been in the office doing something. At risk, I've had like about 8 job titles in that 13 years, but a lot of it's been around the same kind of work. So it's been a lot of policy development, kind of frameworks of practice development, training, professional development, those kind of areas. Mostly around chaplaincy. My first role within the Brisbane office was at-risk youth consultant. So my background further is social work. So I spent a social work degree, spent about 6 or 7 years working as a social worker in the community, and then moved into the chaplaincy space and moved onwards. So they saw how I was doing my chaplaincy and asked if I'd come into the office and start talking about at-risk students and at-risk young people and how do we work better with those as chaplains. And then on that journey came to understand more and more that a lot of the work chaplains are doing are with students that are struggling and at risk of a range of different kind of harmful outcomes in their lives. So the at-risk work moved more into the centre of what chaplaincy was about. So we're talking about what chaplaincy is, we'd be talking about a lot of pastoral care kind of work, not just with kids that are struggling, with all kids and staff and parents and family across the whole school community. But certainly having a look at that, what does it mean for young people to be at risk, and what's the role of chaplains in that space? So over time I've had a lot of roles really in Scripture that have essentially been about the same thing. What does it mean to kind of be a chaplain? What does it mean to kind of be the youth worker in this chaplaincy framed up kind of way in this school context? So I've really been kind of drilling down quite deeply in exploring all of that for the last 14 years, particularly after that 6 years of practice. Just in terms of my own personal journey of faith, interestingly, it's not a very big surprise that I got into youth work in any shape or form, because I grew up in a family where youth work was actually part of what we did from before I was born. My parents would say, while my mum was pregnant with me, my mum and dad were leading camps for young people. So I can literally say before I was born, I've been exposed to Christian youth work. So my parents were from the Brethren Church, and they were involved in Christian youth camps, a Christian camping organisation. And I just grew up on my holidays going to these camps. I went to those camps as a kid. I was an assistant leader and a leader on those camps. I started doing the leadership stuff around that, and then moved from there to work with Scripture Union. Other people in my church also gave me opportunities when I was young to be assistant Sunday school teachers and assistant youth group leaders. So the whole thing of youth work and children's work has really been in my blood. I almost feel like in some ways I didn't have a choice. I probably always going to inevitably end up doing youth work in some ways. The key turning point for me, but in my life, I guess we can probably all look back and either identify one or a few key turning points. But one of the key turning points in my life was when I was 16 turning 17, and that fine young specimen of manhood is me, is me basically 30 years ago. Alright, so that's me at 16, 17, and I'm in India there. So as you can see by my build, I'm a natural volleyballer. I play front row forward for volleyball. I should really be playing rugby league or something, but I got into volleyball somehow, and I made state teams. And I was playing A grade. I was quite good when I was young. It's obvious, isn't it? That's going to be my sporting career. But one of the things that happened when I was young is I got invited to go with Ambassador Sports to a missions trip, a volleyball-themed missions trip. So we were a volleyball team. We would play exhibition matches in India, and lots of people would come and someone would share the gospel and all that kind of thing. We were going to schools and places and do coaching clinics and all that kind of thing. 6 weeks in India as a 16-year-old. And it was a life-changing experience for me. So my theological kind of Christian upbringing didn't really prepare me in lots of ways for poverty, poverty on a national scale. It didn't prepare me for the questions that I then started to ask about who is God, what's God on about, is God real at that point. I really came back a little bit faith shattered in some ways. The exposure to all of this poverty just made me go, oh, is God real? If God's real, does God care? If God's real, is God powerless? I really came back struggling. It took me a little bit of my next few years to kind of rebuild a new kind of faith, But one of the key aspects of that new kind of faith, I guess, was understanding differently a little bit to my theological upbringing and understanding in a new way a God who is, and the term I guess I use, you'd be familiar with at this college, the idea of holistic kind of theology or shalom, the idea that God is interested in all areas of life and living. I think I grew up in a tradition that said God is interested in my little black heart of sin, and that if I can get it made white as snow, I can be right with God and go to have a home in heaven when I die. And that's kind of what God's interested in. And everything else is kind of on God's kind of, second list, or maybe if I get to it, I'll care about it kind of list. So there's what they call dualistic view, I guess, a sharp interest in, yes, God's interested in the spiritual, but everything else is kind of not that interested in, Whereas I came to understand through various kind of engagements with different people and organisations that God was interested in all areas of life and living. He was interested in this life. He was interested in whether people had clean water. He was interested in whether a kid had good self-esteem. He was interested in whether a family was doing well or not doing well. All these things are actually part of God's agenda, not just things for the government or the community or for other nice people to be involved. And so I started to embrace that framework, theological kind of framing of my life. The God is the God of all of creation. You sing that song sometimes. God of all creation. Yeah. But what does it mean in practice? The idea that God is actually, blurts into existence the whole cosmos and loves it all dearly and actually is actively working towards all of its restoration. And so that became the kind of guiding ideas and relational understanding of God and the purpose of my life kind of thing. And it really shaped then all the directions that I took. It shaped my direction into social work. It shaped my direction in chaplaincy. And really that framework, I guess, has underpinned everything that I've done since. So I just want to share that part of my journey, first of all, that kind of framing up of who is God and what is God trying to do in the world has been very important for me personally. But as you'll see as we just go through this presentation, it's actually been very important for me professionally. It's actually been these ideas that formed the foundation of frameworks that I have then kind of put together and developed and kind of promoted in chaplaincy circles. So I just wanted to kind of introduce. But this photo for me just represents that pivotal kind of experience in my life where something switched off and something new switched on, in a sense. Now, having said that, I don't want to disparage all of what came before either. I'm not going to say, I just kind of totally just threw everything out after that. That's not true either. It wasn't that kind of experience. But it certainly was a renewal of a vision of who God is and what God is trying to do. It's that same vision that I think for the last 30 years of my life has driven my personal world and my professional world. So hopefully that will come out. Now, I was in my current role, just to give you a sense of what am I doing, and Charles has asked me to talk about the idea of equipping recruiter. Reading through the chapter, I found that a very interesting role of the youth worker. I was trying to apply it to my current situation. So my current role, and I don't like, there's not very many of the job titles that I've actually had that I've liked. I don't really like this one. I want something a bit short. Children's and Youth Programs Delivery Manager. And I feel like I'm Postman Pat. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm delivering parcels or something, Here you go, here's your parcel, special letter, delivery. But what we have done is we turned it into the CAPE team, Children and Youth, and so we like that because it makes us feel like superheroes. So we're kind of feeling a bit better about CAPE team, and I'm the CAPE manager, so that's kind of cool. And really what we're trying to do is primarily we're there to promote the effective practice of school chaplains. And I'll talk to you about what I think that looks like in a minute. But alongside that, we're learning a lot about youth work done in school contexts. It's a different way of kind of working in the world a little bit as a chaplain because of the nature of the context of schools. And we're learning some interesting things there about how to do youth work. So what we're also trying to work out is any of that useful to churches? So along the way, as we develop kind of training or resources or ideas that we think are useful for chaplains, we see if that could be translated across to the church context. So we've got an interest in doing that in the second bullet point, the third bullet there. And the way we do that is we either provide training, we either design and provide our own training, resources or programs and support, or we help people access that through other people. So partnerships is a really important thing. So my job is really about equipping, or probably less about recruiting. However, there are some elements of recruiting that I do get involved in. So when I was kind of thinking about, through the chapter you've just looked at, there was a number of different headings, describing tasks and ongoing support, those kind of things. I was kind of thinking the four that really stand out for me in my role, the things that I do that kind of equate to that particularly, not that I don't pray and those kind of things, but it's describing the tasks. That's one of the jobs that I'm really responsible for. My job is to, I'll probably describe it in my words a bit deeper than that, providing a framework. All right, so I'm not just describing what people should be doing, I want people to think through, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's the theological kind of frame behind it? Who is God and what is God trying to do in the world? And then when you turn up to your chaplaincy job, what does that mean for you in practice? I'm trying to get people to think those other levels below. So a little bit beyond describing tasks, but to frame up the work. Framing up the frame of the work. That's my driving thing. I was just saying to Charles before, because I was talking to John Sweetman about whether one day I might come and do a doctorate of ministry in here. So that would be the thing I would do on the professional practice frameworks of chaplains. If I had a chance to really delve deeper into my passion, it would be that area. So that's a big part of what I do. Part of that is qualifications. What do you need to be able to know and do to actually perform this task, these tasks, to be able to carry out that role? I've been involved in those kind of conversations. Even on my work in working alongside Malyon College is a little bit about kind of helping to shape and have a discussion about what qualifications look like for a chaplaincy. A big part is equipping and a big part is ongoing support. So we're developing, I guess, an idea of a professional framework, but the other part of that is how do you help people develop and how do you support people so that they actually remain effective and remain well in the job. For me, 30 years in the track, we're talking about youth work. Now, I haven't done direct practice with youth work now, I reckon probably about 4 or 5 years. So am I still a youth worker? So asking questions about what does it look like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the track? Is training still youth work? Is research still youth work? Is policy development? Is lobbying still youth work? It's just interesting questions to ask about in these roles. Providing ongoing support for people so they can develop in their practice and maybe working out how that understanding of that role morphs a little bit over time, and grows with them, So yeah, so that's what I want to just kind of talk around those kind of headings. So what is this thing? So it's just starting with, I guess, the idea of describing the task. This is taken from a slide, a PowerPoint slide that one of our chaplains has put together when he does presentations about his role. And so this is kind of what do people think chaplaincy is, and this is often begin a session on frameworks of chaplaincy around this. What do the media think I do? So the media often talks about chaplaincy as this really kind of Christian religious, kind of deep spiritual kind of thing. Maybe there's elements of that, but that's certainly what's put across in the media. What do atheists think I do? They think that chaplains are there with one big message about something, they're just trying to kind of slam it around it. What do parents think I do? Not that we're magicians, but we've got magic wands to fix kids. They think we're kind of just able to fix kids like that. Sometimes teachers think that as well. But often teachers will take a different perspective and think we're maybe the counsellor, the therapist who's going to, again, fix kids but in a different kind of way. Now, this is an interesting one. This is we do whole days and sessions on this particular picture. What Christians think I do. Because school chaplaincy and the spiritual conversations are framed up in a particular way in a school setting. And we can't say what I like to say the magic words that Christians like to often use to say they've had a legitimate, spiritual conversation. Because we can't do that the way other people can kind of do that. A lot of Christians go, well, what's the point of chaplains being there? If you can't say these things and kind of, if you can't draw two cliffs and a fire in the middle and across to go, you can't get people walking between God and man or two ways. If you can't really do that stuff in that way, what do you do? Why are you there? Why should we support you? So again, it comes back to questions like, who is God and what's he really doing in the world? And so this is why these things become important. And then this particular chaplain Stu there with the dreadlocks, he's one of those cool looking chaplains with dreadlocks that you often see on all our brochures because they're cool. what I really do, and his vision of what he really does, is journeying alongside young people, to promote their well-being, their social, emotional, spiritual well-being. Now, why I put these up in terms of a framework for chaplaincy, why I say it's to our guys, it's really important that people develop an understanding of what they're doing in chaplaincy. Not just what the tasks are, but what are they doing underneath, is because every other person out there has got an idea of what they're doing. Their own idea. Wrong, biased, skewed one way. Because actually there's probably elements of truth in all of those pictures. There's probably little bits of all that go on, and should go on in balance, in the appropriate way. But unless we are able to kind of explain to our recruits, this is what you're being called to do here, this is what you're being asked to do. And it's a theological work, and it's a theoretical kind of well-being kind of work. It's a work in a difficult context. How are you understanding that? How will you then be able to outwork that understanding in practice? So this idea of describing the tasks, I think, is a really important aspect of my role. And we found that it's really important for chaplaincy to have this description at the deeper level, because it's kind of unique. It's kind of a unique context. It's kind of a unique setup. And what we find is people come with their understandings from other backgrounds and other contexts and other knowledge and skills that have worked in those contexts. And they come to school to try and think about what does it mean to have a spiritual conversation, to engage Christianly in this. And they struggle to actually use those tools they brought with them in that place because the context has changed. Does that kind of make sense? And so they need to sometimes they need to think about their theology, rethink some of their theology. They actually need to go that deep. Sometimes the context pushes back. Sometimes it actually pushes back in a good way that actually goes, maybe the way I've thought things aren't totally the way everything is. And that's good. It's a good chance to kind of reflect on that. Sometimes we think the context pushes back on us and makes us rethink, and we think, oh, bad context, But actually, these things are opportunities for us to go, hold on a minute. Maybe the context is my teacher. Maybe there's something about what the school says I can and can't do that I should actually stop and learn from. And not just apply that near learning in a school setting. Maybe I'll go back to my church and youth group and actually say, something I learned over here actually helps me actually be a better youth worker over here. So the context kind of pushes back, and then people have to rethink some of those core ideas about who is God and what is God doing in the world, and how does that look here? And then, of course, what knowledge and skills then do I need to learn? What do I need to pick up now to be able to engage effectively in that space? So let me give you a little example of that before I move on. We've done a bit of training with our chaplains on what's a spiritual conversation look like. All right. Now, again, a lot of our chaplains have got training in pastoral conversations, those active listening, counselling-y kind of skills that you do where you listen and you take people through a problem-solving thing to help people come up with their own outcomes, right, for their life. And a lot of them are quite good at that. However, for some reason, when it comes to a spiritual conversation, there seems to be a little bit of a stream through some of our learning in our churches that we block all that off and cut that off to the side, and then start telling people everything we think they need to know. We start giving them all of our answers to all of their spiritual kind of questions. So we kind of, in chaplaincy, the context pushes back and says, actually, your one message, your one answer that you've got, that's not what schools are about. Schools are about a different kind of thing. So if you've come with that set of skills to have a spiritual conversation, and you can't use that set of skills there, you might be left with nothing to be able to have a spiritual conversation. So we did some PD with our chaplains last year on the question-asking skills of Jesus. All right? And people go, well, what's that? Well, if you add up all the questions that Jesus, let me do this a different way. Jesus was asked, across the 4 Gospels, Jesus was asked 180 questions. Okay, so he was asked 180 questions. So questions are an important part of his conversation. How many do you think he gave a straight answer to? Just answered. Let's pop a figure out there your head. 30? Yeah.
5.
5, yeah. Does everyone think he was kinder than that? 7 to 8. 8 straight answers to questions he was asked. 180 questions asked. And then in turn he asked 307 questions himself. 307 questions. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing Jesus did. For goodness sake. Where's our question-asking skills training in our evangelism training or our spiritual conversation training? Why isn't this like a major thread? Although, why do we not understand it? And why all the questions, Jesus? Why why ask the questions? You know, so we kind of explored our guys and said, do you think that schools would be happy with you asking questions of your kids about spirituality? Yeah, actually, we kind of think that, you know, the school uses terms like spiritual exploration, the unique spiritual health of an individual. They actually use that kind of language in their policy stuff. We go, oh, questions would be a good set of skills, wouldn't it? Okay, so here's the policy context, and here's the example of Jesus coming together in a place where you can actually use a whole, you know, set of skills that Jesus is promoting in your work, total integrity to your faith, total integrity to the context. Now, most of our people, you get to that first PowerPoint slide that has 187A, you know, 307, and that's the kind of changing their theology. Who is this Jesus? If he's asking all that questions, what does he actually want? It's not just about explanation, it's also about exploration. I think, oh no, I didn't think about that. Have I got something to offer Jesus in my ideas and my, you know, so we start to get people thinking about what does it mean to practice in that, but it's got to be theological. It can't just be a set of tasks and different knowledge and skills. You've actually got to drill down to what's God, who is God, and what's God trying to do in the world. Helping people to kind of integrate ideas from the Bible into their practice to suit that context. Does that kind of make sense? There's a set of ideas and principles underpinning a set of knowledge and skills that fit the context. That's my professional framework model, which I'll show you what it will be next. This is the model that I use to base my description of what a chaplaincy professional framework is. So in here we talk about what's the profession of chaplaincy? What's some of the theological ideas that underpin it? What are some of the principles and values that are underneath it? What are some of the knowledge and skill areas that you might find yourself needing to work in? And so we talk a lot about that in that space. And we talk a lot about shalom and holism and God's interest in the margins and the poor and those kind of things, and God's interest in all areas of life and living. So we kind of engage in all of that. What kind of knowledge and skills do you need then to be able to engage with people around their everyday issues and spiritual content? So we have all that conversation. So describing all of this then leads you to describing the task. So then what will a chaplain do? You know, so we get to that kind of stage. But there's a whole lot of work I think that needs to go underneath that describing that's really, really important in youth work, particularly in chaplaincy. And in this model then we also ask questions about who are you then? Who are you as the chaplain? You know, what's your journey into this profession? You know, why are you here? How did you get here? You know, what was the kind of, I was able to tell you a key turning point in my life, a key moment in my life, and I can trace back, you know, the journey and see how I got from there to here. What's your journey here? Who are you? What are your gifts? What are your abilities? What are your passions? What are your strengths? What's your other experiences? What are your vulnerabilities? What are your blind spots? What are your weaknesses? What are you still going to have to learn? So a sense of self-awareness in that space. So really important in my professional framework, practice framework model is not only understanding what chaplaincy is, but who am I as the facilitator, deliverer of chaplaincy services. You know? So I need to understand what this is to be able to understand what I need to be asking here, but I also need to be able to understand what this is to see if it fits here. So I've got to talk, all the circles talk to each other. And then of course the outer circle here is about context. And as I was saying here, I think the school context is quite a unique context. It actually, you know, it pushes back and says some things about what spirituality is and what religion is and where Christianity fits in and what kind of youth work we like and what kind of we don't. So it kind of pushes back on us and helps us to reshape things. Well, it doesn't help us, it kind of makes us reshape things. And some of those things we don't want to reshape. Some of those things, as I've said, it becomes our teacher and we learn to rethink some things. So I think that chaplaincy has taken Scripture Union on a big journey in the last 20 years. Some people will say, yeah, Scripture Union's developed chaplaincy. I say it's the other way around. I say chaplaincy has actually developed the organisation. We've come to see things differently. We've come to engage with God a bit differently. We've come to understand the community and our relationship with them a bit differently because the context has kind of pushed back on us. So all of my training and practice is based on this model, and this is how I spend a fair bit of time with people trying to describe the tasks, I guess, describe the roles. So everything that we do is based on this. We have competency maps based on this model. Our AAPs, our annual operating plans, annual reviews, kind of based on the competencies and things that flow out of these models. So it becomes the framework around which we have our conversations around what chaplaincy is. And then we also describe, that's probably just that's probably our theological model that I was talking to you about before. I guess our holistic kind of model where we talk about all of life, the personal, the relationships, the local community, the broader society, all of these things, you know, God is interested in, God is engaged in, God is present with. And his shalom, his wholeness, his harmony, his peace, his health, his happiness, that's his agenda. So our understanding of God is a God who is present and active and interested in the world. And he is trying to bring about his vision of wholeness and harmony and health and happiness and salvation in all those areas of life and inviting us to participate. Now you can describe a set of tasks about what a chaplain can do, but if you really want to transform the work of a chaplain, you've really got to start talking about this. And I'll tell you what, in training that I've run with chaplains, I've just seen people light up. Just seen them, I've had people come to me with tears in their eyes, just go, thank you, thank you. I didn't just need this for my work, I needed this for my life. I needed to know that God was interested in all of me, in everything. I need to know that for my friends who are 16 steps away from even mentioning the name of God, that God is doing something in their family life, that God has a vision for their self-esteem, that God has a vision for what's happening for them with their employment. You know, I needed to know that God could actually be there with them then, and not have to jump through hoops to get to this sort of privately spiritual conversation. We can talk about two cliffs and two ways to live or something like that, you know. And so we find that this is the level, in terms of equipping people, it's maybe even deeper than equipping, it's empowering people. Empowering people with a vision for what's behind the work that they're doing as youth workers. And once that's going, once people start to get that, that then starts to inform what's the role, what are the tasks, what do I need to know, what do I need to be able to do to carry off this role and be effective. Because if you start in a different place to this, then what will flow out of it will be a whole different set of outcomes. Different sets of knowledge, different sets of skills, different sets of roles. So it's really important that when we're thinking about our role as youth workers, even if we've got youth workers in our church and we're working with volunteer teams, to be able to take our volunteer teams on the journey, what are we being called here to do in this group? Is it babysitting? You know, is it safety, risk management things which are boring? Is it answering emails? Is it doing up the flyer? Now, all those things are tasks and things a youth worker would do, but if people kind of get underneath that, is this thing going on of which these tasks actually make sense of, then suddenly all those tasks actually become something a lot more meaningful. And people are not only equipped, but are actually empowered to be able to do that work. So it's a fairly big thing for me to really get chaplains excited about this deeper. I want them operating out of here. You know what I mean? Not just out of here. I want them operating out of here with the sense of connection to God and what God is on about. The passion for that then flows up into their head and their hands, and then that's how it's outworked, I guess, in the world. So for me, that's really, really important. I want to spend the most of my time with you just encouraging you to think about that maybe in your own youth work roles and youth work stage. That's what it means for me as I work with 600 chaplains, you know, across the state to kind of empower them for their effective work. But it's the same dynamic. I think whether we're working with 3 people in a church or 10 people on a camping team, what are we here to do, guys? Are we here to get through the program? Are we here to just have no fatalities, no broken arms? Are we here just to tick the box so the pastor gets off our back? What are we really, really here to do to get people excited about that idea? This is just another thing about describing. When we start to drill, all that's very, very lovely and very motivating and very kind of out there, but you do have to still get to the point of describing to people what your role looks like. So I'm not trying to pit one thing against the other. I'm saying it's all really important when you build a framework together, have all the levels together. I think what I've just described to you, I think are, for me, the fundamental foundation stones of the model. But you still have to move to the point here. People still have to be doing things in practice, And so we've developed a common language alongside the Department of Education about 6 areas that chaplains should be involved in. So again, all of our annual reviews, all of our reporting back to committees, all use these kind of 7 areas to describe what a chaplain does. So social and emotional support is like pastoral care kind of work. Spiritual support links a little bit. Sometimes we even mash those together and talk about social, emotional and spiritual support, given that our well-being diagram I showed you before kind of encompasses spirituality and well-being. But these are about the more specific spiritual, religious, ethical questions that people might face Could be questions about, Christianity. Could be questions about, is there anything out there? Could be questions about values or worldview. Could be a range of things. Community development, we expect chaplains to engage and network in the community, to partner with other services that can provide services that the chaplain can't. So the chaplain provides a general supportive service, but not counselling, not high-level kind of response to issues. And so it's really important that they know and are really well networked in their community and linked up to be able to refer people appropriately to those things. Mentoring and role modelling are a really big part of a chaplain's role, just their presence around the place and how they engage. And it's kind of those little informal conversations that they have with people, a really big part of the job. Sometimes they'll support teachers in classrooms or run volunteer kind of reading groups or literacy groups to help support their educational goals. And they're also involved in, a lot of chaplains are coaching sport, helping with the school musical and going on the camps and doing a range of things like that. I said 7 before, but there is a 7th one we call team contribution, which is more like their professional development, their professional support, when they go meet with their committee, when they meet with their line managers. So those less kind of people-oriented things, but those more admin, organisation, professional development kind of things are a little bit more internal. So it's really important for us to have a language around that we can engage. And one of the criticisms we had a few years ago, we had an academic, a national academic, come and visit us and say, one of the roles I had recently was to actually do like a national review of chaplaincy, school chaplaincy in the media, all kinds of government publications and reports, different things people were saying. And one of the things that we came up with was that no one knows what you do. People, even schools, people get a chaplain and then they get a different chaplain, and the chaplain seems to do really, really, really different things. So even people who have chaplains aren't really sure what you're supposed to be coming with to do. And as we look nationally at all the different kind of advertisements and comments and whatever, it was just this amazing range of things. Now, there's some real advantages of some of that, the diversity, the meeting of the needs locally, all that kind of stuff. But you really need to develop a common language. What is it that when someone gets a chaplain, they should be able to expect them to do? And this has been able to help us to describe to schools and to anybody really, funding people, politicians, supporters, financial supporters, and most importantly, chaplains themselves. What is it that you're being asked to do in this role? How does this vision of God get outworked? Well, it gets outworked in caring with people. It gets outworked with engaging with their spiritual journey. It gets outworked through networking with the community. It gets networked through joining with the school and helping them achieve their educational goals. It gets outworked through being able to help kids see all of life is interesting, and if they're involved with music, I'll be there helping you play. Sport coaching, sport's a great thing. You should be a part of that. Let me be a part of your So it's about involved in all of those kind of areas. So we're able to kind of describe so. But then within there, we can drill down to specific tasks that chaplains can be involved in. So a very, very important part of what we do. So the last thing I just want to say in terms of my part of this presentation, I guess, is so moving out of that kind of describing area. I won't leave qualifications for the moment. But if that's a question people have got, maybe I'll leave that as a question thing at the end that you can ask me. But the last thing I just want to talk about, I suppose, is professional development, professional support. So how do we ongoingly support and how do we equip our chaplains? Now, one of the issues that we have in the space is that our chaplains are dispersed across the state. So we have 600 chaplains in 800 schools. They're Cape York, Camberwell, which is 13 kilometres away from the Northern Territory border, all the way up and down the coast, all the way out west. So I've just spent a few days out of Billawheeler and Blackwater. My colleague is up at Cairns and Mackay. We're going to Townsville. We go to chaplains at Longreach, for chaplains at Blackwater. They're kind of dotted around the place. So one of the issues we have is it's very, very difficult for us to support chaplains because they're kind of dispersed. So we get together with them maybe once a quarter. Some way. So every quarter we have an in-service day. So one of the things I'm involved in months where I was at Billawheeler and Blackwater, we go and visit a group of chaplains once a quarter, and we do some PD. So we did PD around domestic and family violence this time around, but we've done working with gay and lesbian students, we've done the spiritual support, Jesus asked, question asking, we're going to do a whole, whatever seems to be the topic that we need to address. We go and do some PD with them, they pray together, they meet together, they're encouraged by being together. So we're trying to look after them in that way. We're getting them together, providing them some PD, but also providing them some prayer, some support, some biblical input, a time to share ideas and just kind of enjoy each other's company. So we do that in term 1, 2 and 4. And then in term 3, we have our big national conference where everybody comes together. So all 600 chaplains come together, plus all the staff from the offices. So maybe 650 people. And we get to go to SeaWorld for the week, which is a reasonably new thing. And we have this great time. I've just invited John Swinton to come and be one of our big speakers for the week. And he said, yes, that's really exciting. So we do that. So again, we have electors every day. We have biblicals. We have a big speaker, Steve Bidoff, coming this time, like a big national kind of families, raising boys and girls kind of speaker. So we try and give them really good time. Pamper them a little bit, treat them to be a nice place, but really good quality input. So we try and support them that way. We also ask them to have their own professional development plan, an individual one that will include those events I've just mentioned, but also helping them to identify maybe individual training that they want to access just for themselves. So they might have a particular interest in responding to crisis, so we try and help them access some training that's coming up in that particular area, that's a skill set they need. So we have our general PD, but we also have a PD plan for them that they need to kind of work out themselves and sign up. And the other thing we ask them to do is what we call professional supervision. Professional supervision is like counselling for workers, I guess. So if you're a helping profession, if you're a social worker, a chaplain, a counsellor, generally there's some requirement for those people to go and see almost like that kind of work counsellor themselves once a quarter or once every few months to kind of debrief, to kind of learn, just talk about their issues. Like I'm doing professional supervision with a chaplain 2 o'clock this afternoon at our office, and we'll kind of talk about how he's going in his role and what issues is he facing. Is there any kind of cases with kids or families that he's struggling with? Is there an organisational issue that he's struggling with that wants some resolution? So we meet once a term to kind of talk about those kind of things. So we're trying to find those ways to be able to continually input into the world of our chaplains. Some of that's very broad and general, the stuff that we come up with as a broad cohort. But then we also try and have more individual opportunities like supervision and like people's individual PD plans to be able to make sure that we're not just assuming that everybody needs the same thing. So again, I think that's a really good kind of idea to keep in mind if you are leading a team. What kind of training and do you think that everybody needs to have in your team so that everybody's on the same page in certain areas? But also, what are some of the things individually your team have got gifts and abilities in that you might want to be kind of looking for opportunities to kind of further them individually. Last year, in looking at some of our research, we do twice a year surveys of chaplains and look at their activities, and we do the kind of statewide, we did a national snapshot this year as well with all the other states, but a Queensland snapshot of what chaplains do. It became really obvious to us that a lot of our chaplains are running programs. They're running super clubs or regenerate, so Christian kind of content programs. They're running social emotional support programs like Pathways or Rock and Water or Drumbeat, things that kind of help kids that are more at risk of disengaging in the school. And we go, we don't really know if our guys have got the skills to be able to do that. So we've just recently developed a 2-day group work training program called A to B, Life-Changing Groups, and we're taking that around the state. So again, what we're trying to do is identify a core set of needs within the tasks and actually provide cheap, time-efficient kind of training that we can make portable across the state to try and make sure that our bottom line of quality of service goes from adequate in this area, and we can more guarantee that by, maybe through a 2-year cycle, everybody will be good, at the very least, So some of our role is about trying to work out where the big, gaps are or where the important areas are, and how we're able to then find ways and solutions to be able to meet the needs. So I think it's a really important aspect of the role. Not only are we trying to encourage and empower people to understand what they do, we're giving them a clear kind of picture of what it is they are to do in terms of role statements or descriptions, but also to be looking for their development in those areas, but also their care in that area. How do we support them to remain emotionally, spiritually well and developing and growing in that space as well? Because depending on the youth work role, youth work will take stuff out of you, take stuff out of our people. And And so we need to be continually looking for ways to be able to review and restore them to be able to do that. So there are challenges in the role. The challenges is that kind of distance. The challenges are the limited amount of opportunities that we get to actually input into chaplains' lives. It isn't very much, just 4 times a year really, to be able to really get in their faces and kind of try and do something. So there are some challenges there. There always seems to be never enough resources and never enough of us to develop resources. So we're always struggling against the sense of we're not providing enough, But for me, the joy of the role, or the real payback, I guess, is when we are engaging with chaplains and they do light up. They light up down here, but also they'll come back and say, oh, I applied that group work training to my school and the kids really responded, or that program you told me about, we're now implementing that and the school's really happy. Yeah, so I think what really lights me up is, I guess, when we are actually being successful. You know, when you're getting the feedback back saying, oh wow, with kids, with families, with schools, this stuff that you're providing makes a difference. So I guess the other important lesson for that is to be open to the feedback and to listen to the feedback and to see how you integrate that kind of feedback into your practice to make sure your good ideas that you might have in your head are still being responsive to the needs of the people that you're working with. So look, that's kind of what I wanted to say to you today. I guess I really want to talk about describing the tasks and more about the ongoing support and the equipping, because that's really what my role is. I do get involved in the recruiting from time to time, but only really where this kind of stuff kind of influences what people need to know as they're applying for the job. So I hope that's given you, I know it's a big long blurb, but I hope that's given you some sense of what it is that my youth work role, 30-something years on down the track, looks like these days. Quite different, of course, from when I first started.